kind of shifted my audience, and I would like to get back to the contrast in agendas. And this was one of the reasons why I did this special program tonight. I do see one of our very old friends, Mr. Larry Holman. He's here in the queue. Good evening tonight. How you doing, Larry? You're on mute. You're muted there.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be with you, James.
Yeah, a long time no see.
I know it's been a while.
um, there's a couple of subjects that I'm going to get to, but what did you think about Mr. John Stewart and the finally getting a bill passed for the burn pits?
Well, I think it's great when somebody with his kind of celebrity gravitas can enter the fray and focus a lot of attention where it needs to be focused. It's too easy for these folks to duck and hide and run away from those issues unless there's a lot of public attention focused on it. And of course, John brings that to the table, and he uh, he did a magnificent job. Uh, he's always an eloquent spokesman and has a way with words, and he makes his point very forcefully. And so I think probably had it not been for him, uh, that would have been a tough piece of legislation to get finished. And now, fortunately, it's already been enacted into law. The president signed it, but it's just sad that it had to go through all those different bumps in the road before it finally got there.
Well, the thing that really kind of ticked me off is this is something that we've been discussing, complaining, however you want to do it, since Vietnam. I mean, this was, when you start talking about carcinogens, I mean, you can see the methane coming up off the pits. I mean, it's no, so it was just kind of hard for me to go through, like how we still have to go through these struggles, even though, we're not benefiting from it financially, but that's a continuous struggle.
Well, it is, and uh, the the Vietnam veterans are the ones that really started focusing attention on the needs of veterans. Uh, for some reason, the World War II veterans were kind of put off, and maybe that was because it was still fresh in their memory what happened to those veterans that tried to get some pay when General MacArthur basically fired on them, uh, the World War One veterans. And but so anyway, the Vietnam vets really uh, had to wait a long time and fight real hard to finally get some recognition of their problems that were caused by Agent Orange, the herbicides that were used in Vietnam. And of course, that kind of set the tone for future veterans and made it a little easier for the future veterans. But it's just a poor policy, I think, when the Veterans Administration was supposed to be an organization there to serve the needs of veterans, uh, uh, regardless of what era they served in, and they have to prove some causal link between uh, their health condition and their time in service and what they were specifically doing while in service. And well, that's pretty hard for a veteran on their own to prove scientific causality between their exposure and the sickness that they've got. Uh, so, uh, but these are the kinds of things that the government that sends us into these kinds of situations. It's like an employer who has an occupational injury on the job. and then refuses to take care of that employee afterwards.
Yeah, it's I mean, like you said, it's amazing, like all the things that we had to go through for Agent Orange, and then you know, so many, there was so many things done wrong that it's kind of you know, but uh, the one thing that another thing that kind of bothers me is that just like with Roe v. Wade, where we had men kind of having taking control of women's bodies and reproductive rights, I feel that we have a bunch of congressmen or legislators that are not familiar with the military, and therefore it's easy for them to kind of push it aside until it's election time or it's feasible for them to get reelected.
Well, unfortunately, with politics, it's all about the numbers, how many votes are involved, and right now we have maybe about 1% of the population serving in the military. Well, that doesn't translate to very many votes, and so if you've got huge donors that are opposed to government spending of any kind, then the inclination is going to be, well, let's satisfy our donors first and think about the veterans later. So that's why there has to be so much political pressure coming from the veteran community to make these things happen because basically we're fighting against the oligarchy that wants to eliminate government. Uh, some of the economic forces in this country would like to see taxes disappear completely. Uh, and if there's no taxes, there's no government. And so, uh, basically all they want left, I guess, is the military-industrial complex. Uh, but they don't want government spending to be done where it benefits individual human beings. Uh, so it seems to me, anyway. The latest indications are that there are a lot of them that are not don't even believe that we should have a democracy. Some people are beginning to say, well, this country is really not a democracy. We're a republic, and I guess the implication there is that people really don't deserve to have the right to vote because we're not a democracy. Well, I don't know. It just seems like they're not going to be happy until we're pushed into a situation where we are, in fact, a full-fledged fascist oligarchy.
Yes, it definitely seems like we are being pushed this way. Now, I know, we've talked before, and you have a lot of background in law enforcement, and you're a part of the Jewish speakers. You go out and do speaking in front of a lot of different audiences. We've seen a lot of anti-Semitic movement within the last few, actually more within the last, I would say, 9 months to a year than we have in quite some time. We have policemen that seem to be more intent on punishment and taking the law into their own hands than really addressing the needs of the neighborhood. What do you think about uh, police reform, as I call it? When I said defunding the police, and of course there was a lot of people that just ran with that, the wrong way. But when I said defund the police, what I meant was that we could take some of these funds and use them in a much better way for the good of all. Uh, when you have uh, police officers that are retiring that have been sitting behind a desk for 10 or 12 years, shouldn't we take those jobs and use them to put police on our streets and to update, maybe some of the social services that are provided by our police? All calls are not violent calls. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, we have, right here in Philadelphia, we have so many shootings that are happening. We're on track to break last year's record, and uh, I am just amazed that more attention is not focused on these issues. Uh, but looking at police reform, I think there's a lot of room for improvement uh, in the way that the police department functions. Uh, there seems to be a lot of reaction after the fact. Uh, People react to when somebody gets shot, then the police show up. But by that time, it's too late. The deterrence that they might have been able to provide, the opportunity for that is gone. And too many times, uh, police report to a problem, and they make the problem worse by misinterpreting what's going on. Many times we've had situations where people have had mental issues and have been acting out, and they end up getting shot 40 times or something. Uh, and that's not the right approach. And I can't understand why that's the way that they were trained. That there ought to be more compassion, and like you say, uh, we don't always have to have an armed police officer show up at these situations. If we had people trained in the mental health sciences uh, to accompany the police or to get there even before the police do, and make an assessment of what is needed in the situation, then I think that would help. So I think we need some people to be unarmed and looking toward how can people in the community be helped. We seem to wait until it's just like the traffic uh, intersections. You wait until there are several deaths occur in accidents at an intersection before you put up a traffic light or something. Well, that's the same kind of situation here. We're waiting too long to actually adjust the way we do things uh, in order to save lives. We wait until many lives have been lost before we're forced into addressing the issues. Here in Philadelphia, we have many universities and many healthcare institutions, and in those uh, buildings, there are people with a great deal of expertise and knowledge and wisdom about sociology, criminology, psychology, and psychiatry, and all these things. I don't know why the city of Philadelphia can't develop a commission uh, to gather all this brain power together and study the issue and see what the solutions are, and then make those recommend solutions to the problems. But I remember back about 40 years ago, a judge, well, she wasn't a judge at the time, she was a young assistant district attorney in Philadelphia. She went on to become a judge later on. Her name was Lisa Richette. And she wrote a book called Throwaway Children. And in that book, she described, the situations. Uh, there's about 40% of the people in Philadelphia live under the poverty line. And so a lot of problems are caused by the maldistribution of benefit, welfare and benefits and income and wealth. And but she went into these situations, investigating them, and she found horrible neglect of children and so forth. Because sometimes the mothers were single mothers, and maybe they were strung out on drugs or something, and resorting to prostitution to support their habits. And so, in one case, she found a child that was neglected to the point where a rat had eaten off some of its toes. And so, she wrote a whole book about all these horrible things. And then the last chapter was nothing but the whole chapter was recommendations on how society could fix some of these problems, not only in Philadelphia, but nationwide. And as far as I know, very few of those recommendations have ever really been fully implemented. And that's a very sad commentary on our society when we can't get people to rally around the need to make sure that nobody is left behind in terms of having their basic needs met, like health care, for example. I mean, nobody should go without health care. Nobody should have any hesitancy at all about seeing a doctor when there's any kind of suspicion of health problems. So when you talk about defund or refund, uh, you know, this is what is necessary. We need to look at the whole picture and not put it let it be assumed that police officers can solve every problem that comes down the pike, because that's not what they're there for.
Precisely. What's up tonight, there, Bill? Good to see you, my man.
I just had a little trouble getting into the room. I had my Mac with me, and it didn't like this, so I had to use my iPhone.
Oh,
Hey,
okay.
I'll tell you what. I think there's hope yet. I understand that the Republicans are talking about defunding the FBI. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. We're going to talk about that too. But uh, since the three of us are Vietnam veterans, I opened up talking to Larry about the that new Burn Pit Act and what John Stewart did for that. And I still don't believe that if it had not been for him and veterans actually sleeping on the Capitol steps, that bill would have been passed. We've been talking about burn pits since Vietnam.
yes, John Stewart is a hell of a nice guy. I worked for him in a movie called Irresistible, and I enjoyed the daylights out of it.
Larry, there's something in your background that we're hearing. Do you have a radio or something on in the background, maybe? Okay.
Me? No.
No, no, no. I was talking to Larry. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Bill. You
John
you was
Stewart's the man. That's all I can say.
you say you worked for him?
Yes, sir. We made a film called Irresistible, a little political satire film 2 years ago, I think it was. I just had a little bit part in it. You probably wouldn't recognize me because I didn't have my beard. One of the few places I took my beard off. But I was the
Well, I see that there's already new commercials up for Adult Swim, so I see you guys are going to have a great season, and what's been happening in your neck of the woods? Larry was talking about some of the things that are happening in Philadelphia. How are things down? We've talked about how things how SAG has been influenced by different travel restrictions and the different states, and how are things going in your neck of the woods? I see that you are on set.
well, just like always. If you have a union, you have a voice in what's going on. My biggest problem is I live in Atlanta, and Atlanta is a Democratic stronghold in a Republican sea. Although we sort of fooled them last election. Um, I enjoyed watching our Republican primary where Trump put Purdue up against Governor Kemp. Neither one of them I care for, but we do have a savior in Stacey Abrams, I think, who will save us if we can just turn out the voters.
I thought you were going to say Herschel Walker. I guess, I guess the look says it all.
Yeah.
Oh, uh, good evening, Natalie. How are you doing this evening?
Pretty good. Good evening. Had a few
Uh,
technical difficulties, but I'm here.
they it's the electronic age, so it's something that's to be expected. You and William were the last ones in, so I wanted to kind of set up what I was talking about when I was talking about uh, police and defund the police and how it was kind of taken negatively because when I said defund the police, I'm talking about putting more taking people off desk jobs where they're sitting behind their, a desk all day, not really attending to the affairs of the neighborhood, but getting paid and getting paid well because they've been there for 15 or 20 years sitting behind that desk, you know, and why we can't take that money that we save from paying these people that for their seniority and for sitting behind a desk and put this into different um, organizations or departments that can handle other situations rather than those that have turned violent. Uh, Natalie, ladies first.
What's the question?
Well, the question is, what did you think about deforming or reforming the police in their current state so they can deal with other situations rather than always resorting to violence?
Yeah. I definitely am for that. I think it was an unfortunate use of terminology because it felt like a charged way to call that, but I'm all for it. And I think that a lot of police departments are going that direction because they don't want to handle mental health issues. That's not what they're trained for. And I know that I think it's the sheriffs in Temecula and maybe the Marietta PD, because I'm up in Marietta and Temecula. They do have a unit now that is a non 911 unit that you can call if somebody's tweaking on the corner or something. And it's not really emergency, but they have people that come out and deal with the mental health crisis of that to make sure they're safe. So I think that they hear that. They I don't know if they agree or not, but I think a lot of them do because I don't think they want to go out on mental health calls and stuff. I really don't, and I think we do need to switch the funding around. Obviously, clearly, I think it's a huge problem. I know our PD did a training on autism because a lot of calls are, a lot of calls that sound like abuse or violence are maybe a person with autism having a meltdown, and that's not a crime. It's their sensory issues, it's their mental health issues. And so I know that our police department went through a big training on that a couple of years ago, and it was kind of set a little bit of a precedence. It just needs to spread to all of the police forces. They're willing to put money into it, and it costs money. So defunding, how about we say, rearranging the funding? Like, let's reallocate the funding. Defunding is kind of poking the bear.
Well, I'm going to go back and kind of rely on my age a little bit here, and as you can see, Bill has a whole carpet on his face there, so we're all a little long in the tooth. So we could probably remember when you had groups like the SNCC, the Black Panthers, uh, and other organizations that were calling for defunding of the police back in the 60s and 70s. And I don't see where things have really expeditionally gotten better. What's your thoughts on that, Bill?
As far as I can tell, uh, those efforts have sort of like died. When I hear defund the police, I think we've got to stop turning them into paramilitary outfits with military uniforms and boots and that sort of, and armored cars. That's where I'm seeing the defunding, and I agree that the term is bad. The term should be reallocate resource.
I was
Larry?
referring to the last 2 years also. You know, I don't remember what it was like in the 60s, but I'm referring to the last 2 years these changes have occurred. It's new. You know, I think yeah. So I agree with you. I don't think it happened before that. Absolutely.
Larry, what's your thoughts here?
Well, it seems like, you know, we know that because of the camera phones that folks have now, there are a lot of recordings being made of police misconduct. And of course, that's a good thing because they're being exposed. Now, my guess is that a lot of that misconduct was going on long before these cell phones came around. We're just much more aware of it these days because of the exposure, the light that's being shined upon it. But it seems like police have been able to lie and submit false reports and shade the truth and so forth to avoid responsibility until recently, when we have graphic evidence of their conduct. It's much more difficult for them to skirt away. Now, you know, the first time we saw real justice in this thing, or maybe not the first time, but among the first times and the most significant lately, was in the George Floyd case. And all the officers involved are going to pay some kind of a penalty, with the lead officer, of course, getting the most severe penalty. But this is what has to happen. There has to be accountability, particularly when people are holding positions of trust and being paid by the public to perform a service for the public.
Now, good evening, Dan. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing? Good. How are you doing?
We're doing fine, and that's Mr. Holman, Mr. Tukowski, and Natalie there in the corner. And we're glad to have you join our conversation. And you joined just in time because I want to switch over to education.
Okay.
And some of the things that have been happening, you know, and as Natalie pointed out, these have been changes within the last couple of years. And I'm talking specifically about book bannings, the numbers that have coming back in education. I believe the United States is once again in the bottom fourth of the entire globe as far as education. We're ranked, I believe, 49th in the world in a lot of cases. What do you contribute this sudden, I guess, war on education? You know, what our children can read, what's acceptable for teachers to teach in schools. What's your thoughts on that, Dan?
I think in the short term, the easy answer would be the pandemic, with the virtual learning, students being at home. Of course, I don't really know that that would be any different anywhere else in the world, though. But my experience with the virtual learning was I would have students at home. I would be up at my classroom with a computer, all by myself in my classroom with a computer in front of my blackboard, and I would look on my computer, and there would be 25 icons, student icons. Our school doesn't have bandwidth that I could actually have the video on, so I could kind of see what they were doing. So all I would see was an icon, and that meant they logged in. And then I would talk with them, and I'd be giving the lesson, I'd be lecturing, and I'd call on a student. And it was the same situation all the time. It was, John, do the next one. John. And finally they would say, oh, you glitched out for a minute, or I was in the bathroom. And like, no, you aren't. You went back to sleep. You were watching TV. You were playing a video game. So I think in the short term, the problems that we're having right now are related to that. They developed some really bad habits during the days of virtual learning, I thought. And then last year, when I would say the majority of the year, the students were actually physically present in the classroom, they had just developed all these bad habits. Like they were used to not listening to the lecture. They were used to not doing the work. And so some of them would get really bold, and they'd put their headphones in and they'd listen to music and play video games and totally tune me out. I know the administration this year, I think, is having no cell phone policy again for the year. Now, to your question, as far as it being in the longer term, you said we were about, what did you say, 49 on the globe?
Yes.
49 in the entire world. I think some of it's complacency. I think the United States is a little bit cocky and kind of thought, oh, in the United States, we have the best of this and the best of that. And I think the general population got lazy. I think parents just took it for granted that whatever education their student was getting was the best in the world. So they didn't really care about the students really tried.
You're breaking up a little bit there, Dan.
So they didn't really. I'm sorry. So parents didn't really seem to care whether their students did well or not. And then another thing I noticed, I've been teaching a class called Applied CE, and it's geared for students that are not going to a four-year college. It's basically geared for students that are going into the workforce and into a trade school. And so I don't teach things like research papers, because you're not going to do a research paper if you're going into the workforce. It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of their time. So instead, I teach more practical things. And I think it's great. The students really like it that are going to a trade school or going right into the workforce. They really like my class because I focus on things that they're actually going to use. But there is a caveat with that. There's this kind of movement that I've noticed right now, with a whole lot of people saying, oh, you don't need to go to college. Nobody needs to go to college. It's too expensive. And it is. I think it is way too expensive to go to college. But they're almost like putting down the whole notion of having a college degree, like as if it's something that's just a waste of your time. It is kind of like this mood of anti-intellectualism that's going on, and I don't really care for it. I mean, I'll tell the students that I have, it's like, yeah, that's great. If you know what you're going to do and you know you want to go into this trade, let's by all means, let's focus on that. But let's not put down the kids that want to go to college also. So I think there's this kind of anti-intellectual movement that's going on.
Natalie, you have two kids in college, and I'm assuming that your youngest daughter that just graduated is going to be going to uh, institution of higher learning. Also, what's your thoughts on this kind of dumbing down of our nation?
Hmm. Um, yeah, I have a 18-year-old who just graduated from high school, and I agree with Dan that pandemic was brutal. It was hard to get him to do it, and I don't see it so much as in my experience that people are saying don't go to college, but I do see a huge push to go to JC, junior college. It's free the first 2 years after high school. So you can knock out the general ed and then transfer to university. So I see a huge shift of kids going for that. And AP classes, that whole 4.5 thing, that kind of did go out the window during COVID. It really did. I wanted to say something about the numbers of our education being 47th in the world or something like that. We have to remember that our country, by law, every child is required to go to school and they are required to test every child. But you are comparing us to somebody like, you know, I don't know, Switzerland or somebody who you have to test to get to the next level. So by the time the kids are testing to get to 8th grade, testing to get to 9th grade, testing to get to 12th grade, you've got the cream of their crop. And you're comparing their cream of their crop to our entire population of kids in 12th grade. That includes kids that have, maybe learning disabilities that aren't out of the mainstream. And it includes kids that are in disadvantaged areas that don't have the same education. Whereas other countries, like I said, you have, by the time you're getting to 12th grade, yeah, it does look like they're smarter because they're only testing the cream of the crop. So I just wanted to say that. Not that I think we have a great education system. We have big problems, huge problems. But it's not really fair to say, it's comparing two different things, in my opinion.
The point that you're
So
making,
I have a daughter at Berkeley
I
and a
agree
daughter
with
at
you.
junior college. I'm sorry, Dan.
I said I agree with the point you're making completely. We, as public education teachers, we take all the students, and we're having all of our students compared against other countries' elite. And that's a point I've made with people before frequently. Also, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
One of the things that I've talked about consistently, uh, I had to teach my grandfather how to read. Okay, I have a 17-year-old nephew that's in 12th grade, and he can't read a comic book. So maybe you're right, Natalie, but when I look at the education, especially within the poor neighborhoods, and I'm not just talking about black neighborhoods, I'm talking about many neighborhoods below the poverty level, where you have children that are taking care of their family and not going to school. I can use the city of St. Paul as an example, where they just had a teacher strike, and they were complaining about the quality of education of the students. But yet and still, the state education board of education had a surplus of almost $9 million. So it's not that the money is not there. I think that just like when we talk about police reform, as far as education, we that's another area that we need to look at. And as you said, Dan, some kids aren't meant for 4-year colleges, and we have to have uh, some type of program to get them into the education force. But one of the things that I'm also concerned about, and Larry, I'm going to go to you, just you first. A lot of these books that are banned are books that we had that were considered required reading when we were in school. Catcher in the Rye, and a bunch of others. I mean, what's your thoughts on our state of education there? You're muted.
Oh, oh, I guess assume that you were calling on me.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, be- Before I continue, could I ask that everybody that's not speaking mute because I'm hearing a lot of feedback and I don't know where it's coming from. Okay, I think we fixed it. I'm not sure everybody was hearing that feedback, but I was. So, regarding the education problem, uh, I was very lucky that the military educated me. I got through high school all right, but I was kind of a poor boy from the farm in Nebraska and couldn't figure out how I was going to. I had a football scholarship to go to a junior college, and they told me I would have my tuition paid during football season. But then I'm thinking, wait a minute, college is more than just football season. How am I going to cover the rest of it? So there was just so much uncertainty in my young mind at that time. When the Navy said, come on in, we'll take care of you. I went, and then as my career progressed, I gradually got more and more education. And then after I retired from the service, went back to school and got a couple of graduate degrees. And in my mind, there's no first of all, there's no substitute for experience in terms of learning how to do a job. But also, uh, they did a study of nurses, and you got two different kinds of nursing schools. One kind where it's all theoretical and so forth. You spend 4 years going right through all the didactic kind of nursing courses, and you come out. And then you got another kind of school where it's very much practical. They spend a lot of time in the hospital at the bedside. Well, they compared those two groups of nurses and studied them, and they found that the ones coming right out of the classroom in onto the nursing floor were not as efficient as the other ones in the very beginning. But after a few months, they began to excel and really outpace the others that had a lot of practical experience because uh, they were already geared up to learning and learning new things, and they had this underpinning of theory that it was easier for them to pile more information on top of. And so, I'm a strong advocate of both practical learning and uh, theoretical learning or book learning. And in today with in these days of the internet, uh, everything can be discovered and learned about on the internet, or almost everything. And so uh, that we should try to harness that somehow. And getting back to the poverty issue, there are lots of folks in some neighborhoods that don't have Wi-Fi and don't have access to it, or they don't have access to the other technology, the hardware and the software that's necessary to take full advantage of those things. And we're an information society, and we shouldn't be leaving anybody out of 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 that process. Everybody needs to have access to the same information. I mean, some of our founding fathers said, uh, with a democracy where you have voters, it's imperative that the voters be informed. It's only an informed electorate that can maintain the democracy. And so, democracy is at stake. And this gets back to something I said earlier. Part of the process of dumbing down people and of our nation as a whole being content with that and not paying teachers what they should be getting. Teachers, I think, should be among the highest paid people in our society because they are making the greatest contribution to the future of our nation. But I think, um, well, I think I lost my train of thought. Is what I think.
Hey, that happens. But if you think of it, come on back in. Uh, Bill, what's your thoughts on that? Have you seen anything within your industry? I mean, excuse me, William. Have you seen anything within your industry as far as maybe apprenticeship programs, or has there been an increase in interest in the screen business or the entertainment business?
Well, I came out of a background where I served an apprenticeship for 4 years for to become a tradesman. I was an electronic repairman in a previous life, commonly known as an electrician. But I think a lot of the cognitive learning that you learn by working with a journeyman is lost today. I remember when we were talking about nurses. I remember the way that you went to school to be a nurse was the local hospital had a building attached. It was the nurses' school, and the girls slept in there 24/7, and they would come out and do the labor that today that they use nurses' aides, and they go to college to become nurses without becoming a journeyman. Does that make sense at all?
Yet certainly things have changed, and we've tried to streamline a lot of things. Now, do you have any more feedback on that?
Well, I have three very different learners, and I think we're in a society where it's instant gratification, it's instant input, and we're kids don't learn the same that they did when I was in school. And I mean, I have my own three kids, so I can see it firsthand. Juliana, really good at reading books and figuring it out. My son had to be hands on. So they have this program called Read 180 and Math 180, where they do the same lesson, but they do it four different ways. They read it, they do the computer, they do manipulatives. And he just shot through the roof with his grades doing that program because it hit several different parts of his brain, and he has ADHD, and it also reinforced it several times. But it's such an expensive program that they only have it for low testers. I think if they could get that program with your $9 million that you're talking about, James, and have it accessible to all the kids, we would see a huge jump in learning and testing. And I'm not a big fan for testing or teaching for to the test, but that's kind of how we do it. You know, we teach to the test. So when you do the Read 180, you're catching all these different aspects and the kids absorb it better. And I think that's the direction we need to go. It's just so expensive. It's not, like you said, it's not accessible to most districts. We only had 40 spots at our school. So it had to be 40 low testers out of like 800 kids that got to go into that program. And it should be accessible to everybody.
Precisely,
Yeah.
precisely. I agree with you 100%. Um, couple of the subjects I want to breach on here before I let everyone go. I'm usually one that doesn't watch the clock, but I do have to respect everybody's time here. And I want to talk about the recent overturning of Roe v. Wade, and of course, the reason why we don't have a John Lewis Voting Act as of yet. And we still have election deniers that are winning primaries in various states. Look at Liz Cheney. Uh, so, Nadia, I'm going to start with you here. Do you believe that the GOP will win the House of Representatives in the midterms? And what effect do you think it'll have on the 2024 elections?
Uh, it's scary. I did not think that it was going to go the way that it's going right now with the primaries, and it's been a little shocking, to be honest. It's so disturbing. I don't understand it. I don't even know what to say. I'm in shock. I just can't believe that there's that many people that are going that direction. And I think it's going to absolutely change everything if, the Republicans take it. It's just going to change everything. And it's going to be scary. I was shocked that the Roe Wade thing happened. And I was really glad that Congress, tried to do a quick fix and put it out there that it wasn't going to be. I can't remember exactly the details of it, but they were trying to make a safety net there with Roe versus Wade. But I don't even know what to say about it. It's just shocking. It's shocking. As a woman, I never thought that was going to happen, and my girls are beside themselves. They're just like, what? They can tell me what to do. Thankfully, in California, we've got some really good protective laws. But what about everybody else? It's
you can be arrested for coming to California to get an abortion.
Yeah.
From certain states.
A lot of states opened up the right to sue somebody who goes to another state to get an abortion, which is kind of a cop-out. It's a cop-out. It's like they don't want to be a bad state, so they're going to just let it be legal to sue so that private people and, organizations can sue instead of the state being responsible for being the bad guy, which that's slick. I think that's slick. Not slick in a good way, just disturbing. So I'm speechless.
Do you think that if he's not convicted of a felony, that Trump will be the GOP nominee in 2024?
I don't know. It's really hard to imagine that. I want to say no way, but the way things are going, who knows? I don't actually think anything's ever going to happen to that guy. He gets away with everything. He's never held accountable. So if anything comes out of it, I will be shocked. I think he's got so much protection and so much money. I don't think we're going to see any consequences for that guy. Is he going to run? Why would he? I mean, I don't know. I would, my head is telling me no way. But then the reality is it looks like it, right?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
Bill, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think the GOP will win the House? And do you think that if not convicted of a felony, Trump will run again?
The sad part that I see is the way these people get elected is my friends don't go out and vote. Voter suppression is the biggest tool that they're using to stay in power by denying people voting. So they get discouraged and don't go vote. There's a great organization called moveon.org. And typically what they're doing right now is anyone who has joined, they basically say, I'm going to name 3 people that I'm going to ensure go vote. And my 3 are my 2 kids and my wife. And I'm going to make sure that they go vote. Otherwise, we put these people in power by not going to vote. So it's a two-edged sword. It's the first part is they suppress the votes by removing people, eliminating the ability to use a absentee ballot, and then they can convince us that we don't need to vote. Election day should be a holiday where no one has to vote or no one has to work. They should vote. So I would say the biggest single problem is apathy.
Dan, what's your thoughts on that? Being an educator and seeing how things have progressed down through the years.
Which question, actually?
as far as number one, do you think that the GOP will take over the House at the midterms, and do you think that Donald Trump will be the candidate in 2024?
The House. I think it's possible the GOP will take the House, which I don't know if that's actually like the final nail in a coffin or anything. It seems like there are a handful of Republicans that are willing to work with the Democrats in the House. So even if they would end up with a majority, maybe the Democrats would be able to find enough people that would cooperate that they could get legislation passed. I'm hoping if that's the case, if the Republicans do take the House. I don't think they're going to take the Senate. Um, Being in Pennsylvania here, is the big race between John Fetterman and Dr. Oz. And Dr. Oz is not a popular person, even among the Republicans here. So I'm cautiously optimistic that Fetterman is going to win the Senate in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump. Oh boy, he's like a virus that won't go away. um, I think he'll be their candidate. You know, he's in all kind of trouble. I mean, just scandal after scandal after scandal. But I almost think that the GOP, or a large chunk of the GOP, has become practically a religious cult. He's their God, Messiah, Savior, and he can do no wrong. I think that he'll believe any lie that he tells. They'll go along with anything that he says, and they'll do all of these mental gymnastics to try to justify things that he's done. So do I think he'll be their candidate? I think if he decides that he's actually going to run, yes, I think he will be their candidate. So that's my thoughts.
Mr. Holman, your thoughts?
I think it makes it mandatory that the Department of Justice do its job, and I know there's a lot of reluctance in terms of holding people at that level accountable, but it is imperative that they do that because our democratic republic is hanging by a thread, and if this guy spends one more day in the White House as the president, it will be the death of our democratic republic. It'll become an authoritarian dictatorship backed up by a fascist oligarchy, and nobody will ever have to worry about voting again in this country. Now, it may set off some kind of a civil war or something, but and depending on the outcome of that, there might be voting again. But this is a real serious situation that we have, and that's why the Department of Justice needs to do everything in their power to make sure, and in fact, Liz Cheney said she herself was going to do everything in her power to make sure that Donald Trump never sees another day in the White House. And I think the whole nation should unite around that idea. I'm sure that there are other people ready to step into his place to do just as much damage as he would do. So we have to be aware of that as well, and make sure that those people don't get in there either. But a lot of people, a lot of progressives in this country are very disenchanted. They're saying, well, there's no difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, and well, I remind them that the only home that the progressives have found has been within the Democratic Party. We do have the Squad and a few others in there, that are progressives, and we just need to continue moving in that direction where we can become a compassionate nation. We need to foster an attitude where we in our rugged individualism, capitalistic kind of country here, we've sort of attached some kind of romanticism to this idea of of everybody competes as hard as they can with each other, and the winner takes all, and that's the way it ought to be. Well, that is not really a sane policy as far as society as a whole is concerned. All humanity needs to learn how to cooperate with each other instead of compete with each other. We need to learn how to support each other instead of try to get ahead of the next guy. And so I know that's a big transition for us to go through. But if we can do that, if we can overcome, each one of us can overcome our own individual greed, anger, and ignorance, and we can do that collectively across our entire population, we might have a chance at saving the planet from complete destruction.
I'm going to stay with you there, Larry. What do you think that the election or re-election of these people, I'm talking about like McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, uh, you know, uh, uh, Ron DeSantis. If we keep putting these same people in office, how can we expect a change?
Well, that's the problem, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of education. That if we don't have people that can can think critically and can apply some logic and practical thinking to the reports that they get over various so-called news stations, then and if we keep everybody in these news silos where they're misinformed constantly, and all that misinformation is reinforced, then it's going to be difficult to wake people up, and we've got to break out of this idea. But I think one of the things that's really going on in this country, while we know that the fascist oligarchy wants to convert this country into a dictatorship, and they're going to use all the tricks in the book to do it. And one of those tricks is to foment division within the society by pushing those race buttons and getting people to turn against each other. If they can get us to turn on each other, we will never notice that it's them that's really hurting us. And so that's the big plan. And so we got to get people to thinking clearly about what is really in their best interests, and thinking long term. But that's a huge lift because we have so many. Well, if you look at the way intelligence is distributed across the bell curve, we've got half of the population that are below average intelligence. So that is a big, heavy lift.
I definitely agree with you there. Bill, what's your thoughts on that? How can we make a change if we keep sending the same people back in office?
Well, change is going to happen, but I don't think change is going to be liked because, like the gentleman before me just said, it's a plan and they know what they're doing. And as far as Trump, as my final statement on that is, there is no one above the law, except maybe for Dolly Parton. But other than that,
Dan, your thoughts on that? How do we make a change when we keep doing that? Isn't that the definition of insanity? Keep doing the same thing over and over, but expecting a different result.
Well, the obvious thing that we talked about already is voting and getting people not to be indifferent and going out and vote. Mr. Holman, right? Something he said earlier, kind of something that I'm doing with my senior classes is I think schools haven't been teaching critical thinking skills. So in the last about 3 years with my senior classes, I've been teaching critical thinking skills, logical fallacies, things like the slippery slope fallacy, the confirmation bias fallacy, uh, the black and white fallacy, you know, the straw man, or I'm sorry, yeah, the straw man argument, straw man fallacy. I've been teaching all these things and giving them examples. I deliberately stay away from the political stuff, but hopefully, I'm hoping that they can see these examples and think, oh, well, that's what I'm hearing on the news, and that's a straw man argument, or that's a slippery slope argument, and that's a logical fallacy. So I'm trying to teach the critical thinking skills, and maybe uh, if more students learn the critical thinking skills, and they'll become adults with critical thinking skills and be able to see through some of what's going on rather than just blindly accepting it. Um, yeah.
Natalie, you want to give us the final word on this subject? What's ahead for us? Are we gonna see Trump back running again? How race relationships going to improve? Uh, what's your thoughts on this upcoming election?
Yeah, I agree with William. We definitely need to vote. That's what's going to change it. And I was kind of wondering if Dan, uh, I know for my two older kids, they were registered to vote in their senior year. It was part of the curriculum to have them fill out registration. And I didn't know if that was a California thing or my school district thing. If you do that with your kids, um, I think it should be pushed.
It probably should be.
Critical.
I live in such a red area, though. I'm not in a big rush to get more red voters. I'm just trying to educate them before they actually do get to vote. But yeah, I understand.
I think that we're going to see some interesting tactics from the really young voters because there's a movement on TikTok to have everybody register as a Republican so that the Republicans think they're stronger than they are, and then they vote Democrat. And that happened with Biden. They started that with Biden, and now there's another push for that. They have all these little tricks that they're doing that are kind of interesting and slick. It's a little scary for me because it's not really on the up and up, but they're not on the up and up. The Trump camp's not on the up and up. So we do what we do.
Dan, very good having you tonight. It's been a while since you've been on. Why don't you give us your final thoughts for the evening?
Final thoughts for the evening. One thing I was going to say was, since we're talking about education, I don't know if you've seen in the news or not, but Ron DeSantis has kind of made an attack on education in Florida. Apparently, they're having a teacher shortage in Florida for a variety of reasons, and low pay and just everything that's going on with banning books and all that. So a lot of teachers are leaving the field. They're also at least leaving Florida. So recently, I think in the last week or two, he made the comment that the requirements to get a teaching certificate are too rigid. And so he's suggesting that first responders or retired first responders are probably qualified to go in and substitute teach or maybe teach full time.
Yeah, veterans too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have nothing against any of these people, but I don't know that they're qualified to go and teach a class of something that they're not familiar with. So, like I said, big problems with education, and yeah, and hope Trump doesn't run.
Bill, I know you just got finished shooting today, and you're trying to get back to the bar and the buffet. So, why don't you give us your final thoughts for the evening?
To be perfectly honest, I'm saying my prayers for this next election and trying to influence everyone I can on social media and face-to-face contact. It's got to be a grassroots movement to turn this country blue from one end to the other.
Larry, your final thoughts for the evening.
Well, I remember that we had brothers fighting brothers. And, just looking at my own family dynamics in this environment, I can understand why that would have happened. Because in my own family, among my siblings, there is a huge divide in terms of the way we think about the way the nation should go. And so I just think it's very scary. There's more and more talk about civil war, and we need to damp down that kind of discussion. But at the same time, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. But we all have to be vigilant. And I agree with William that we all of us need to do all we can to support candidates that will do the things that we think they need to be doing after they get elected, and that will be responsive to the people and not to the large donors. Thank you.
Natalie, as always, respect the time that you spend with us. Love having you on the show, and I'm going to give the woman the last word.
I don't know. I think I've said it all that I need to say. I am always an optimist, so I walk through with the
Good
hope
for
that
you.
Trump's gonna have a heart attack and we're all gonna be best friends again. That's always my hope. I have a brain that sees reality too, but I think that I'm 100% behind what William and Larry and Dan are saying. We need to educate, and absolutely, Dan, if you're in a red area, let's, go back a little bit. But I think that's all we can do right now. Just educate, encourage everybody to vote. I'm very interested in the tactics the young people are coming out with right now. It's very unique, and I'm just, hopeful and praying that it works out. I don't know what else, besides, like, I can't even say it out loud, but if that guy were no longer around, that would be the best case scenario. So,
Well,
and I'm, I don't even know what to say about that after that. I just go
yeah.
away. We'll all
I,
be okay.
I know
Go away.
when I talked to your son the last time, they were talking about how they were filling up seats for Trump rallies and not showing up. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I thought that. Yeah, I thought those tactics. I mean, the younger generation, they do have a
Yeah.
handle on the social media and how to
Very
get
much.
things done. So,
But with the
let's.
whole like outside social media, outside of the norm that the Trumpsters have going on, that I don't know much about, and that would be another good conversation if we had somebody who is familiar with where they're getting their information. I don't know where the Trumpsters are communicating. I'm not attached to that. they're not on my platforms. So that would be interesting. And I appreciate you having me here. It's always an interesting conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank everyone for being here tonight. I enjoyed the conversation, and I will be calling on you a little bit later as things go on, and we'll have another show like this. So, thank everyone, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate our audience, and I'll see you guys when we have another relative talk topic to talk about. Have a great night. I'll see you soon.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.